This is Tornado Talk, a weekly podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenons. Share your tornado story online by email or call us toll-free 800-439-1570. That's 800-439-1570. Now, meteorologist Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday, Tornado Talk is on.
Movie theaters were filling up with fascinated fans of weather. 20 years ago, it was the release of the motion picture Twister.
Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt were Bill and Dr. Joe Harding with a mission in mind to dig deeper for data that would save lives in a big tornado.
The movie would go on to become the second highest grossing film of 1996, selling at least 55 million tickets in the U.S. alone.
There are fantastic effects and flaws in the movie. Tales about a real twister tearing through movie screens while audiences were watching. Are they true? And we have lined up special guests to talk Twister.
Warning coordinating meteorologist Rick Smith from the National Weather Service in Norman.
It was actually a great tool to raise awareness about severe weather, and who knows how many new meteorologists are in the field today because of that.
Forever Chasing's Bryce Kentai.
What an amazing movie. This is crazy. I mean, they take a left turn and they see a tornado, and then they take a right turn and they see a tornado.
Storm chaser Raquel Sharp, who has likely lost count of the number of times she's seen the movie.
To this day, I absolutely love the movie Twister.
Meteorologist Nathan Jurgensen.
If there was any kind of thunderstorm even that went through the area, sub-severe of course, my friends and I would get on our bikes and storm chase.
And the man who had a cameo appearance in the movie Twister and provided special graphics and effects for the movie, WeatherNation TV co-founder Paul Douglas.
Hey Bryce, you better come here and take a look at this. I did it 9 times before Jan de Bont, the director, was satisfied.
Twister is 20 years old.
Cow. I gotta go, Julia. We got cows.
We all have our own memories of watching Twister, and if you love weather, you've likely seen it 1 or 2 times, maybe 22 times. It's still as big today as it was when it blew into the theaters on May 10th, 1996. Jen, did you go see it?
Absolutely. In fact, I had just graduated college. I went to Penn State to have my degree in meteorology. So, of course, I had to see it. It's a weather movie, and I have to admit I liked it. Of course, I just have this fresh degree, and so I'm picking out some of the weather flaws in there, but it was an awesome movie.
I went on opening night in Wichita, Kansas. Really tried to block out some of the scientific things because a few people I knew went to an earlier showing that day, and they said, there's some things that don't really coincide with science, and so I really tried to block that out and just let my mind escape and enjoy 2 hours of a great show, and it was just awesome.
Dan, warning coordinating meteorologist Rick Smith at the National Weather Service in Norman, Oklahoma, watches over Wakita when severe weather breaks out. He's on the line with us. Rick, did you go see the movie in 1996 as excited as we all were?
Oh my gosh, of course it did. If a meteorologist tells you that they haven't seen it or that they don't stop when they're flipping through the channels, I don't know if you should believe them all, because I do it, everybody does it. I mean, it was a big deal in 96. I was working at a different National Weather Service office at the time, and I remember how cool it was. We got some advance passes to go see it, and then we went back on Friday night when it opened and set up a table out in the lobby and handed out tornado safety brochures and things like that, and talked to people about tornadoes. And it was actually a great tool to raise awareness about severe weather, and who knows how many new meteorologists are in the field today because of that.
One of the things I was uncertain about, Bill and Joe take cover under a bridge during the first tornado, and we usually tell folks that this isn't the best place to take cover. What do you think?
I don't know that exact scene was all that bad, actually. When we caution people about taking cover under bridges, usually what we're talking about is people that are stopping under a highway overpass or something like that. That's a really bad idea in almost every situation for a variety of reasons. Number one, chances are there's not going to be enough parking for all the vehicles that want to do that to be safely off the road. So you're probably going to end up blocking one or more lanes of traffic. I think that's the biggest hazard. Number two, contrary to myths and popular belief, there's nothing magically safe about that overpass. I think I think some people think a tornado is like a vacuum cleaner hose just dragging along the ground. And if they're underneath something, then that will keep that vacuum from sucking them up or whatever. People don't understand that a tornado, there's a large horizontal component to the winds, obviously. So some of the worst things that can happen to you if you take cover under a bridge or an overpass like that is, the wind actually channels in that small area. When the wind is blowing underneath that overpass, it actually gets faster as it's blowing through a smaller space through that wedge shape underneath the bridge or overpass. So you're actually increasing your exposure to debris. You're increasing your exposure to stronger winds. In a lot of cases, when you're climbing under a bridge, you're actually climbing up, and that's the opposite direction that you want to go. The scene near the beginning of Twister, their first encounter with a tornado, if I remember correctly, that was they were almost in a ditch, and it was almost like they were under a bridge, but they were in a ditch. So it was kind of what we sometimes advise people to do, combined with what we don't want people to do. So it's a weird situation when you think about it, and I hope I'm remembering it correctly. But yeah, but even in that scene, even in that situation, the forces that they would have been experiencing under that bridge were not just upward forces. It wasn't just where you see the nails coming out of the boards and the truck lifting up straight up vertically. There would have been a lot more horizontal blowing of debris and things like that. Really, and this is hard to get across to people, but really there are no good options in taking cover from a tornado outside. Our best advice is just tell people don't get caught in that situation to start with.
Rick, do you recall an instance where you were issuing tornado warnings for the Wakita, Oklahoma area, and then it looked like something might happen similar to what occurred in the movie?
I can't think of a specific case, but given Wakita's location, they're in far north central Oklahoma, not too far from the Kansas state line, and I don't know about any other meteorologist, but anytime we type up a tornado warning, or the computer types up a tornado warning for us, and locations in the warning include Wakita, you kind of think about that a little bit. I do occasionally, and I know other meteorologists have to do that too. I don't know that part of the country up there. I can't think of a specific example, but I know there's been plenty of storms in recent years that have happened. And they've actually happened after dark. It seems like in certain weather patterns that we get in, we will see supercells develop out along the dry line in far western Oklahoma. And as they make their way northeast toward dark and a little bit after dark, there's something about that northern tier of counties of Oklahoma. Sometimes it just seems like when I don't know if it's the low-level jet kicking in or what it is, but the storms just can sometimes just go crazy up there. And we've had some big tornadoes after dark up there in that immediate vicinity. So it's with weather here in Oklahoma, there's very few things that Hollywood or people doing disaster scenarios could come up with that aren't either possible or that have actually happened. So certainly what happens in the movie is not, a large nighttime violent tornado is certainly not out of the question.
Rick Smith at the National Weather Service in Norman. Thank you.
Jen, there are a few striking stories about Twister, but are they true or are they not? On May 20th, 1996, the story goes a severe storm hit a Canadian drive-in, producing a tornado that ripped through the drive-in screen just like what happened in the movie Twister. Well, not quite. Snopes.com has debunked that one. A tornado did sweep through southern Ontario and damaged a screen at the Canview 4 drive-in complex. The drive-in was scheduled to show Twister that night coincidentally, but the storm moved through before dark and no one was there when it hit.
Dan, there's also this. On May 10th, 2010, a tornado struck Fairfax, Oklahoma, and it actually destroyed the farmhouse where there were numerous scenes of Twister shot there. J. Barry Harrison, the owner of the home and a former Oklahoma state senator, commented that the tornado appeared eerily similar to the fictitious one in the film. NewsOK.com says, yes, this happened. There were 6 tornadoes that touched down, 2 houses, 5 barns, 2 silos, a horse, and farm equipment were lost. The roof was gone, but the walls still stood.
It is 20 years of Twister, the movie, and while we're discussing those urban legends, we had an email pour in to us here at Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. That is Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com.
Hello to Scott Currier in Haverhill, Massachusetts. Scott sent us our first email and writes, "Hi guys, I thought your program went quite well and was very interesting. I was very pleased to hear you let your guests talk and answer the questions that you asked them. I notice when interviewers let their guests talk. Very high marks for that. If you're in the U.S. as opposed to Canada, I recommend including a non-800 number. The whole U.S. is a local call. I'd feel guilty running up your 800 number bill when I can call a regular number in your area at no charge. If you are in Canada, then you need the 800 number."
Scott, thank you for the kindness, but we actually have a prepaid card with 400 minutes a month for our 800 number, and we do have kind of a small budget here, but you can call us anytime at 800-439-1570. That is 800-439-1570, just like Raquel Sharp in Wichita, Kansas did. Hi, Raquel. How old were you when you first saw the movie Twister?
Well, when it came out, I was 6 years old. So I was quite young when I first watched it. I remember my mother never really letting me watch it. She never really liked it, doesn't like storms and stuff. I've always really loved the weather and loved, my dad and I would go outside and watch storms. And I remember if they said stay inside, I would be outside, even as a young child. So to this day, I absolutely love the movie Twister.
How many times have you watched it? Do you know?
Oh my gosh. I remember in college, I would always watch a movie. I didn't have cable, internet, anything like that. So I would always fall asleep every night watching a movie, and it would be Twister. And I guarantee it's several hundred times I've watched the movie.
Several hundred.
Do you have a favorite part of the movie?
Geez, like anything Dusty says, really. One of the cheesiest lines, I just love it every time. I don't know why. There's a couple of really cheesy lines. When Jonas comes around the crew, when they're all coming out of the cornfield, and Preacher Man says, "Hello," and then he curses, that was definitely one of my favorite parts. And definitely when the Twister was getting ready to hit Wakita at night when they were at that drive-in movie. And Bill goes, "It's already here." Like, that's like the cheesiest line, but it's so good.
It's already here.
I love that part.
Raquel, thank you. Hey, we got out the record player, Jen.
This is my favorite song off the Twister soundtrack. Rock on.
You have worn out the vinyl. The cassette is all squeaky. And the CD is scratched, isn't it?
You bet.
We have another call pouring in here at 800-439-1570. 800-439-1570 from Forever Chasing's Bryce Kentai. It was May of 1996. Twister the movie came out, and did you see it in the theater?
I remember watching the movie in the Superior, Nebraska movie theater, which is a small town right on the Nebraska-Kansas border. And I actually watched it with my parents. I was only 11 years old. So it was one of those movies that was kind of a family night out, and we went to the movies and we watched Twister.
So what'd you think? Did you enjoy it? Did you notice anything that you thought, I'm not sure if that could really happen? What'd you think of the movie?
You know, at the time I was completely awestruck by it. I thought, wow, what an amazing movie. This is crazy. I mean, they take a left turn and they see a tornado, and then they take a right turn and they see a tornado. You know, growing up on a farm, you can see tornadoes off in the distance every now and then. It's not super common, but I thought, geez, this is intense. This is crazy.
After you saw it, did you say, no, I want to be a storm chaser?
I think what really started the whole storm chasing interest for me was my dad and I, he's a farmer, and we would have a little competition, a little friendly competition about whether it would rain or storm. You know, I would use all the tools online, of course, dial-up internet out on the farm in the mid 90s was just coming out, but 9 times out of 10 he was more accurate than I was. And so for me, the storm chasing and the weather interest really came from an earlier start, even from Twister, where I was awestruck and trying to figure out why Mother Nature, why storms do what they do, and why they go where they go. And so you could see me out in the old farm truck sitting on the hill spotting at probably age 10, even before Twister came out. So that's really where it started for me.
Were you driving the truck at 10, or were you just riding?
Depends on if anybody cared, if anybody cares that I was illegally driving, it was about a mile and a half up the road. So I was usually driving.
Hey, Bryce, thank you. You can watch Bryce and his team Forever Chasing. Terrence, Justin, Danny, and JB all online, foreverchasing.com.
Meteorologist Nathan Jurgensen, proud Husker fan, on the phone. You were a little tot when this movie was released 20 years ago.
I think he was a tiny tot.
I was in first or second grade, actually, and to be honest with you, I don't even remember how I saw it, because I never saw it in theaters, and I don't think it was on TV all that quick after it came out, although I guess I can't remember, but I do recall just seeing it at home and watching it with my family, and it just boggled my mind. It just seemed so incredible that there's people like that out there that pursue these types of storms. And to be honest with you, I'd heard tornadoes, I'd seen, reports of tornadoes, but I'd never actually seen one myself, and it just kind of awe-inspiring how they form and what kind of impacts and devastation they can have. And it just really kind of started my love for weather.
Now, Nathan, I have an issue with something in the movie. We can't know the strength of a tornado by looking at it, nor can meteorologists predict the strength of a tornado. Yet in the movie, they are constantly yelling out the F-scale rating even before the tornado hits. How do you feel about that flaw?
Well, you kind of hit the first flaw that kind of sticks out to me is, they're at the end after they just saw the movie theater tornado scene, and they're just like, the NSSL is predicting an F5, and it's just like, we're not even close to anything remotely along those lines of being able to forecast how strong. There's been steps within the last couple of years, and I've dabbled a little bit of work in my undergrad about, like the impact-based warnings and all that, and we're still pretty far away from being able to accurately predict how strong a tornado is, and that's the first one that kind of jumps out to me, and there's a few other ones, but I mean, obviously with the general public won't know these science aspects of the movies, and it's nothing that they'll necessarily catch on to, but my other favorite one is the cone of silence, so having nothing to do with tornadoes.
Storm chasing really changed after that movie came out. I can remember storm chasing myself before the movie, and you would see a ham radio operator that was out on a hill, maybe a fireman, a sheriff's deputy, and that was it. And then the season Twister was out. It was like a whole new generation of storm chasers everywhere were born.
I mean, I've been on, I can't say I chase a lot, but I do every now and then for hobby. And yes, there are days where there's just a crazy amount of people out, and obviously a lot of this, not entirely, but a lot of it probably can be attributed to the movie.
Thanks so much, Nathan Jurgensen, meteorologist in Kansas City.
What is your tornado tale? If you have a story you'd like to share, call us toll-free, 800-439-1570. That's 800-439-1570.
There were some things in the movie we noticed that were a little off at the beginning. When Joe, Helen Hunt's dad, gets sucked out of the storm cellar, her dad says,
Joe, let's go, come on. TV says it's big, might be an F5.
We're going to the storm cellar.
The TV said it could be an F5. Well, the problem is that this set is in June of 1969. The Fujita scale wasn't developed until 2 years later in 1971.
Now, Dan, there were some things that were dead on in Twister. The satellite mentioned at the beginning of the movie, GOES 8, was a real satellite that NOAA used from 1994 until 2004. Dorothy, the beloved metal pods with little sensors inside meant to go up in the tornado to measure its behavior, was based off of the real-life Toto project conducted by the National Severe Storms Laboratory, NSSL, back in the 1980s. They never got it to work.
One thing that I got to work well, though, my credit card at the Flying Cow restaurant. That's in Norman, Oklahoma at the National Weather Center. You can actually go there and order right off of the Flying Cow menu.
Very cool.
And if you have never been to Wakita, Oklahoma, and you're a Twister fan, there is good reason to make a road trip. If you'd like to see the Twister Museum, it's all about the movie. It's open from April through August. We have a link on tornadotalk.com. You can find out everything you need to know. When Steven Spielberg wants to get a hold of you, you take the call. And when a Hollywood producer wants to give you an appearance in a major motion picture, you accept, even if it is a small role. But this man had more than just that on his plate. He's written 2 books, a third one on the way, loved weather for quite a long time, and has a knack for starting up one successful business after another, including WeatherNation TV that we watch today. Meteorologist Paul Douglas, thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm honored, and you're onto something with the podcasting. I think my 20-something sons swear by it.
Well, I'm glad you think that, because this is a new venture for us. We talk to listeners in certain cities, in certain locations, through what we do on radio, but this is a way to reach anyone, really anywhere, anytime. Why is it, I have to know, why is it you love weather so much?
You know, like most on-air meteorologists, most meteorologists in general, I was traumatized at a tender age, Dan. It was Tropical Storm Agnes back in 1972. I'm dating myself, but I was 14, and it flooded out the basement of our house. I remember swimming around in my underwear in the basement, 5 feet of cold, muddy water, and nobody predicted that this tropical storm would come inland, do a big loop right over Pennsylvania, and it produced just horrific record floods on the Susquehanna River and 18 inches of rain in about 18 hours at our house. And so that left a mark, literally. And, I was traumatized and fascinated at the same time, and that sort of started my journey when it comes to meteorology. That put the bug in me.
Let's rewind back to the 1990s. You founded Earthwatch Communications. How did you and Steven Spielberg work together, and is that what got you involved in Twister?
It's funny how life works. Dan, I worked with some smart people. I was bored with the television graphics I was using here in the Twin Cities. And this was back in the late 80s. And I went to a meteorology conference in Reno, and a Japanese company showed a video, a demo, a concept of 3-dimensional weather. And I went, and this guy got a standing ovation. Every TV meteorologist in the room stood up, gave him a big round of applause. Everybody was fascinated with this concept of 3-dimensional weather. It was amazing. It was like something you'd see from Walt Disney. Kind of a space shuttle perspective, flying into the weather, below the weather, flying into the eye of a hurricane. I mean, it was dazzling. And I went up and I said, hey, I'd love to license this for my viewers in the Twin Cities. And the guy laughed at me. And he said, well, you need $4 million. You need a Fujitsu supercomputer. And I said, well, hey, will you take a check? And he wasn't amused. So he basically pissed me off. And I went back, and the third developer, the third programmer I went to with this vision was able to turn the vision into a reality. So we cooked up this software that used Silicon Graphics hardware. You needed some pretty heavy iron back then in the early 90s to be able to do these 3-dimensional visualizations. Today you can do it on your iPad. You can probably do it on your watch. But back then you needed heavy iron. And so we teamed up with Silicon Graphics, and we created this new software called Earthwatch. And we licensed this to local stations around the country. And some of the stations used it effectively, used it well. Navigating in 3D it's like giving your grandmother a Ferrari. Some people can master it and do quite well with it. Others, it just made you sick to your stomach. But we got a call from one of Steven Spielberg's people who said, hey, Steve likes your software and wants to use it in this little movie we're making called Jurassic Park. And I just read Michael Crichton's book, so I was familiar with the plot. And Spielberg used our software in the control room scenes. You're tracking the storm coming into Jurassic Park, and he wanted a 3D futuristic way to show this storm. So we did that, and then about a year later, the same executive producer who was working with Spielberg Kathy Kennedy called up and said, hey, we're making this movie about tornadoes. We'd like to use your software for the control room scenes. Once again, we want this high-tech effect. So I drove down to Ames, Iowa, walk in this converted barn. They've converted into a control room. That's where all the weather geeks were, where all the meteorologists were guiding the storm chasers to their tornadic targets. I walk in expecting to be supervising some of the special effects, and they say, hey, Paul, you want a line in the movie? You want to be in the movie? And I was dazed momentarily, and I'm thinking, hey, love scene with Helen Hunt? And they were not thinking that. They were not. They said, no, Paul, here's your line. You're looking at the Doppler, and the F5 is just starting to spin up, and here's your line. Hey, Bryce, you better come here and take a look at this. And I thought, okay, I think I can do this. And I did it 9 times before Jan de Bont, the director, was satisfied. But if you blink, if you sneeze, if you hiccup, you miss my big scene. But I actually get royalty checks, Dan. Twice a year, Warner Brothers, every time a DVD gets sold in Romania, I get a fraction of a penny. And my last residual check, I kid you not, my last check from Warner Brothers. And I have to admit, there's a little bit of a swagger when I'm walking up the driveway with my check from Warner Brothers. I opened it up, 1 cent. So the film career is not working out as planned. God has a way of keeping you humble, but I have to laugh every time I get a check. But it was fun working on the project. And my concern was the whole, oh, my God, they're going to Hollywoodize tornado chasing. They're going to bastardize the science. And I'm actually amazed it turned out as well as it did. Their goal is to make a compelling, visual, interesting story that people are going to spend money to see. Could some things have been better? Could it have been done differently? Yeah, absolutely. But when they filmed this thing back in 91, 92, Oklahoma was actually in a drought. So they had to move the entire film crew to Iowa because not only were there no tornadoes, there were no clouds. I mean, Oklahoma was experiencing a scorching drought. And so they did a lot of the filming in Iowa. But of course, all the tornadoes were computer generated. That was Industrial Light and Magic. I think they spent $40 million just on the computerized effects of the tornadoes themselves. But it was an interesting process.
We brought that up earlier. Twister really put a whole new generation of storm chasers on the road.
Yeah, there's no question. And when there's a confirmed tornado on the ground, are chasers observing the posted speed limits? I don't think so. I just remember when I was chasing, routinely, the adrenaline kicks in and you want to be there. And I don't know. You just set yourself up for other problems. And Tim Samaras was a friend. What happened a couple of years ago with the El Reno tornado. And I'm just, it's easy to lose sight of the fact that tornadoes are still fickle and capricious and unpredictable, and they don't always turn in the direction that you think they're going to turn. And, we've sort of anesthetized ourselves, sedated ourselves into thinking that, hey, we've got Doppler radar, I've got my apps, I've got my GR2, I'm going to be able to get to a safe place when I have to get to a safe place, or I can always approach this supercell from a safe direction. And there are just times when you can't, when you're on the wrong side of the supercell, and the temptation is to try to break through the core and drive through the hail shaft. And I don't know, at some point the law of averages catches up with you. And if there are just a few people on the roads, maybe you get away with it. If there are hundreds of people on the roads, suddenly, you may not have the options to be able to do a U-turn, make that sharp right when you want to make a sharp right, get out of harm's way. So we're inadvertently setting ourselves up, for more potentially deadly scenarios, and it does worry me.
You have always been a visionary. Twister moved weather sort of forward with enthusiasm. What do you think's next?
I appreciate what you're doing with this podcast, and we are a nation of armchair meteorologists. I'm always amazed. I mean, I'd yet to meet anybody who isn't interested on some level in the weather. And the technology piece now, there's so many cool toys and apps. And I think there's something about the weather, and certainly severe weather, supercells, tornado research. I mean, people are really fascinated by this stuff. And so I continue to be interested in the visualization. We are moving in a direction with personalization. I think in the future, in the very near future, Dan, we're not going to be so much watching weather channels, watching video streams to get information. My kids laugh at me. I have a son in the Navy who's 25, and my older son is 27, and he lives in Seattle. And they just, they don't watch local news. They want to get it on their terms, and they want it personalized, and they want it on their smartphones.
Thank you so much, Paul, for being with us. Meteorologist Paul Douglas, you can get a hold of him online at pauldouglasweather.com. And you can reach us via email at tornadotalk.com, or just drop us an email at jenanddan@tornadotalk.com.
You've got mail.
We have one now from Aaron Graves. Aaron says, I am a weather enthusiast. I'm an amateur photographer and a skywarn spotter. I love the movie Twister. Over the years, several scenes in which I shook my head and I said, yeah, right, like that would happen, have actually happened. For example, an extreme weather setup that spawns multiple tornadoes over a 24-hour period, allowing some chasers to intercept 5 or 6 twisters. I thought the script writers were making that up, but it really does happen from time to time. One scene, however, predicted the future. In order to get Dorothy into the tornado, Bill Paxton literally had to drive it into the tornado. And I thought to myself when I first saw that scene, that's what it's going to take to get a probe into a tornado. They're too unpredictable just to put a probe down and hope it hits. But yeah, right, nobody is ever going to do that. Thank you, Sean Casey and Reed Timmer. You've literally fulfilled the Twister prophecy, driving your probe-laden tanks into several tornadoes. I'm enjoying the podcast. Please keep it up. Signed, Aaron Graves, Dalhart Cloud Chasing on Facebook. And you can find him at dalhartwx.blogspot.com. Jen?
There are Twister parties across the country in honor of the 20th anniversary. Meteorologist Chris Bailey at WKYT in Lexington, Kentucky invited his weather watchers to view Twister on the anniversary.
Well, the movie Twister was fiction, and although we felt like we lived it, it wasn't for real. But the residents in Joplin, Missouri know all too well how a tornado hit their town. It grew in size, it erased landmarks, and it claimed lives. May 22nd, 2011, 5 years ago. Could the warnings have been better? A storm chaser talks about how he drove right into an area reduced to rubble, and how Joplin, Missouri honored those lost and has rebuilt. 5 years later, Joplin, Missouri, on episode 4 of Tornado Talk.
This has been Tornado Talk, powered by thestormreport.com.